Shh, shh. The podcast is starting. Welcome to the OT Download, from practice to podcast. This is where we unpack everything you didn't know you needed to know about occupational therapy. Whether you're an OT, an OTA, a student, or simply curious, this is your place to explore the real stories, challenges, and opportunities shaping our profession. Each episode will dive into fresh topics from ethics to AI in practice, to the dynamics between OTs and AHAs, the differences between community and medico-legal work, and even what it's like stepping into the courtroom. You'll hear honest conversations on mental health, well-being, boundaries, and early career experiences, alongside insights from lawyers, allied health professionals, and other experts. We'll bust common misconceptions and shine a light on the parts of OT that don't always get spoken about. So if you're ready for insights, stories, and a no-nonsense take on occupational therapy, this is your download. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to the OT Download. I'm Emily, a community occupational therapist at MLEA.
And I'm Ali, a medico-legal OT at MLEA. And today we're talking about something that I think every OT who works with younger clients has a strong opinion on.
Yeah, very strong feelings. We're talking about the transition from paediatrics to adult services. And if that phase makes you exhale a little bit, then you're absolutely our people.
Definitely, because this is one of those topics where the gap between what people expect to happen and what actually happens is considerable.
We're talking about young people who have had this wraparound, family-centred, highly supportive experience of OT their whole lives, and then they turn 18 and it changes so dramatically it may as well have stopped overnight.
And then families are left going, okay, so what now? So today we're getting into what transition actually looks like on the ground, gaps in service continuity, and what we as OTs can do to actually prepare our clients for the shift before they have to live with it.
So whether you work in paediatrics, adult services, community, or somewhere in the middle, keep listening because we're going to dive right in. Ali, from your experience, what's the biggest difference between paediatrics and OT adult services?
The biggest difference probably is the level of involvement I think that lots of services have, so not just OT, in healthcare in general. They're much more involved, and there's a lot more services available for paediatrics than there is in adult services, and much more invested, I think, in propping up kids and their families, sort of in all aspects, whereas adult services are really kind of like self-directed. If, you know, you kind of have to seek out what you're looking for in a service and find the right person, and it's really sort of self-directed in adult services, whereas it's really quite supported in paediatrics, I think is one of the biggest things. There seems to be a lot more funding and whatnot for paediatric services, and which, is understandable. Obviously, early intervention services have definitely been proven to be a really big indicator of good outcomes over a lifespan.
So why do you think that the funding is so different for peds versus adults?
I mean, the population is much smaller in peds than it is in adults, being that it's, pediatric services are 0 to 18, whereas adult services is anywhere from 16 sometimes all the way up to the end of life, which is only getting longer. Like I said, early intervention services are a main focus of pediatrics. You get in treated early, or give kids and family strategies to manage, maintain. Then that's a good predictor of whole of life outcomes, rather than try to fight fire down the road when things start to fall apart, because they haven't had that sort of really intense kind of therapeutic input in the beginning. So things like the NDIS, early intervention services, and the funding around that, not needing a diagnosis, before a certain age, and having access to all of those types of services really helps that. And so a lot of those things become available. You really have to have a definitive diagnosis, and
sometimes 7.
Cracking down more and more, like you really have to have that evidence of impaired function and all of that sort of stuff, which obviously you need to, like, there needs to be parameters for funding, but it certainly makes it easier for people to access when kids are small.
So do you think it's kind of the hope that when the kid is younger, if they give them wraparound supports, by the time they hit adult age, they will no longer need services at all?
Well, I mean, that's certainly the hope, but that's never really the reality of what it is, because a lot of these kids with chronic conditions and, really complex medical stuff.
Lifelong.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can give them all the support in the world. That's great. That sets them up. But it doesn't mean that when they hit 15, 16 and beyond, that's it. They just miraculously don't need all of that support anymore.
Yeah.
So it does make it hard.
How do you think that affects our roles as an OT in the transition period?
I think the biggest shift as an OT is really changing the way you think about your approach to a situation, particularly in that age group where they're starting to become a young adult and whatnot. There's a lot of hand-holding, a lot of demonstrating, a lot of, really propping up not only kids but their families as well, really, really showing them the way of how to do things. And then, as they get into that sort of 14, 15, 16-year-old age, really, really starting to shift the thinking. This person's becoming a young adult, is starting to become more independent, and really sort of leading them down that path and allowing them the opportunity to become more independent as opposed to really holding their hand.
Yeah.
And also doing the same thing for their families, because obviously their family has been a really large part of any therapeutic relationship and, is so important, in gaining a child's trust and really getting buy-in from a child. You really need that from the family as well. And so really instilling in everyone who's involved in their care that, they can be independent and, they've got this, and really showing them the way forward and how to be an adult in that environment.
I guess with like a paediatric standpoint as well, they have so many different environments and so many different people involved in their care, like school as well as extended family and other services. As when you become an adult, all those kind of slowly start to fade away as well. Do you think that's kind of been your experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's super common to go into a school and do their therapy in school and things like that. How often do OTs go out to somebody's workplace, and unless it's like directly workplace related
or an accident?
Absolutely, it just doesn't happen the same way. So there's a lot of those types of things that kind of drop off once they get older as well. So what do you think that transition then feels like for the young person and their family?
Yeah, so I guess there are two different pathways to look at it, right? You've got peds who are about to turn 18, 16 to 18, who feel ready for the transition and feel like they want that independence and that they can be more independent in their everyday life. But then you've got also people who fall under that category who shouldn't be at that level of independence as of yet. I
Chronologically
feel like,
18, but not really an adult.
Exactly. Yeah. We've kind of just decided that 18 is the age you become an adult, but really is that the case for everyone?
Yeah.
So I guess it really depends on what stage they are at in their life, even if they are that age between 16 and 18 and transitioning.
And even those 16 to 18-year-olds who feel like they're ready for transition, sometimes it's it's the family or it's the people around them who maybe don't feel the same way or are having trouble letting go. And
definitely.
Yeah, that can make it feel a little bit
I've had a few situations previously where, the child has been the one who's kind of been pushing for moving out of home or potentially looking to find a new job, and it's really the parents or the caregivers who have been a bit more hesitant than the child.
Yeah, I think that everyone who's had a young adult has probably multiple stories like that too.
That's true. I guess also for the child becoming a young adult and wanting to be more independent, it comes with also managing their own appointments, whether that be like allied health or the doctors or anything like that, and trying to kind of find their own voice in, I guess, the NDIS space and beyond. Yeah. Have you kind of found that with clients you've worked with?
Yeah, and I mean, the transition for any young person, going from living at home or whatnot and trying to find your feet in an adult world is already such a huge milestone in life. And then when you have chronic illness or a disability or even just additional challenges on top of that, that becomes even harder.
I guess also when it comes to changes as a young adult, changing into the adult space, especially within the NDIS, I found that it comes that there's a lot of different changes in the funding aspects, as well as costs with support workers or consumables, all those types of things. So it's almost like they're pushing them to become more independent, even if they're not ready for that situation. Have you found that kind of...
Even in the health service,
Yeah.
Seems to be the same way. There's lots of different services and, all of the different departments in a pediatric service. And then you get to adulthood and, referral criteria changes and, or there is referral criteria where there wasn't before, really in peds. So that's a really big factor sometimes too in, how much input, the young adult has in their care when they don't have the same level of input from specialists and, people looking at them. Then
I've also found that they've had to start kind of making decisions on what they need most. A lot of the time it's like, oh, you have this much funding in allied health, where do you want to use it, as opposed to where they could everywhere. It's like, oh, well, what do I need most of at the moment? Physio, OT, speech, even though it might be all three at the same time. But because it's like they're an adult and their funding gets cut quite a lot, they're having to kind of figure out where they want to go, or even frequency of appointments. If you were seeing someone weekly or fortnightly, and then all of a sudden they've had funding cuts because they're now in the adult service and not early intervention, sometimes it's like, okay, well, we're going to have to prioritise,
what you can actually
what you can do in such a short or such a small funding bucket.
And, a lot of the time the kids that we're seeing are, everything's a priority. It's not like, we're doing it because, it's fun. It's, we really need this to be functional in day to day and, actually getting the skills to be independent. Definitely. So that they, can survive in the adult world and, and do that on their own. It then becomes a bit of a juggling act, doesn't it? What's the priority right now to be able to get, to that level of being able to be on their own. So, and that's a really hard decision for someone who, when just in general life, you've got so many decisions that you have to make for yourself now and not necessarily having the support from mum and dad or
or your therapists.
Absolutely. So that makes it difficult.
But I found a lot that when those kind of transitions started to come in where they were getting put onto adult services as opposed to early intervention, a lot of the time we had like allied health staff who had to start writing, like physio plans or like exercise physiology plans, or like OTs would be making handouts and visuals and all these things so that they could have them when they weren't there, because we just didn't have the funding to be able to see them as regularly, which is really sad and it's really upsetting. But it was like, give them something for the interim whilst we, try and rejig how this is going to go.
And I mean, obviously as an OT, that's always the goal, isn't it, to be able to take a step back. But like you said, like earlier, it's not always the case. These kids aren't always ready for that to be the case, and they just don't have a choice because of services just aren't there and aren't available, and or it comes as a real shock, when they get there. Nobody's explained this process to them properly, or, they haven't really grasped the change. And what that actually looks like day to day for them. And so that can be a really big shock too. So
definitely.
And,
you can prepare
and a shock for mum and dad. They don't have someone to bounce off anymore. So
you can prepare your clients as much as you can, but then it's really when they're going through the transition, you'll see how they react. And I've had some clients previously where, we've done everything we can, they feel ready, and then those changes come, supports drop off, and it turns out they weren't there. And then you're actually needing to see them more often than you did in the beginning to try and get them back to where they were.
a really common thing, I think. And also, like, one of the big things too is that, like, one of the struggles I think for probably a lot of people who work with kids and their families, when they get to that point, you've sometimes been working with these kids since they were really little, and working with them for a really long time, and so you've built that therapeutic relationship over a period of years, and they and their families trust you and whatnot, and it can be really, really difficult for families to let go because they don't have that. They don't feel like they have that support, and there's nobody to sort of to take that on for them.
Yeah,
it's not just that people don't want to or whatnot; it's just the services aren't available there.
Yeah.
So that makes it really hard too. There were some families, like in a service I worked with in another state, the community team worked with them for so long. We were really involved in the kids, and then the equivalent adult service, limited resources. And like I was saying earlier, there's a finite amount of children, really, and such a small kind of age range when you compare it to like when you're an adult and the rest of your life. And so they didn't have the same amount of resources that we had to deal with, such a small population. And so they had a really sort of stringent referral policy and could only hang on to these kids for like 12 months. And so you make the referral from pediatrics to adults, and the adult service picks them up. But these kids are going through a period where they've just finished grade 12, they're going into tertiary studies, maybe moving out, although, less and less maybe now with cost of living. But, there's all of those additional pressures in just changing from being, a kid and then being self-sufficient as an adult. The changing medical scene is kind of the last thing on their mind. They want to be a normal kid. They want to be the same as all of their friends and do all of those milestone type things. And so their focus is that, and so then they would often get missed by these new services trying to pick them up because their priorities weren't there. And then you don't, when you're in peds, you check in with families, and there was always someone sort of overarching to kind of take them to appointments and make sure that they were going. But when it's now their responsibility, one missed appointment, well, how do I make that up? What do I do? Where do I find that information? So that can be fall through the cracks quite definitely. A lot more than peds do, I think. I
also found in my previous role that the wait list for adult services compared to pediatrics was so much longer. And the wait times when someone made a referral for a child was been maybe like a 1 to 2 week turnaround, and then for adults it was like 3 to 4 months just for like an initial appointment. And by the time you kind of get that wait time, a lot of adults would be like, okay, well,
I'm just dealing with it. I've just moved on.
And it's kind of that attitude of, well, no one can help me right now. And then by the time they can, you never know what's happened by that point. So have you seen any programs or approaches that have kind of helped try to bridge the gap between pediatric and adult services?
I mean, I think that clinicians themselves often will try to sort of do as much as they can. But in New South Wales, there was a PhD project from a person with lived experience with a spinal cord injury, actually, looked at the transition process from peds to adults, set up a website with resources and had a look at that whole process. All the health services, if you look and you know where to look, have, booklets with all of the information, which can be quite helpful. But it's knowing where to look and where to go and who to ask. And a lot of the information in the booklet can be quite daunting. Because there is a lot of information that you need, and nobody gives you an adulting handbook.
No,
because there's so much that I know, right? There is so much that you need to know and to be able to do, and that just compounds when you have all of these additional challenges and things that you need to be aware of too. So there's there are programs and things out there, and a lot of the time they're quite condition specific for renal disease or spinal cord injury, those very specific types of chronic disease. There has been sort of research relatively recently in the last 10 to 20 years looking at, you know, people's lived experience and what works and what doesn't, and, you know, what the recommendations are and things like that. But I think it's one of those things that it's so broad and everybody's so different.
Yeah, it's not one size fits all.
No, absolutely. And so then it becomes very difficult to make, you know, a recommendation about transition when, you know, there are so many variable factors.
I kind of found that with waiting for a child to transition from the ped service to adult services, that a lot of the time you're having to kind of prep them quite young and early, and sometimes starting the age of like 11 to 12 to get them ready for that transition. A lot of kind of children respond really well to that, but again, it's really, you know, one size does not fit all.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time I find that sometimes it can work for 12-year-olds, sometimes it can't work until you're 18.
Yeah.
And it just really depends on the child.
Yeah. And I think it's difficult knowing that too when you're working with a kid and, you know, you might think, okay, this kid's only 13, 14, but, you know, they are really great at being able to verbalize what they need and, you know, advocating for themselves. So, you know, it would be great if we could, you know, start this process now, but there's such a big difference in that chronological age. Then they're not ready for adults, like they're not ready for that transition process. And so they're kind of stuck in this sort of limbo and whatnot. And then, like we were saying before, like, it happens the other way too. You get to 16, 17 and it's kind of like you get this push for, and you could have been prepping them for ages and you know, by that time they're still not ready. And so what do you do? Like, what recommendations can you make for, you know, those two scenarios that are the same that will work for both? I think the other thing too, when you're preparing someone for that transition too. You're not just preparing that person, you're preparing
their family. Yes.
Yes.
A lot of the time I find that sometimes you are actually coaching the family more than you're coaching the child.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing.
No.
But I guess looking at it from a whole point of view, a whole holistic point of view, as it's not just a child involved in a transition period, it's their siblings, it's their parents, it's their wider community that have supported them up until this age. Especially I find it's really helpful when you can come together with other members of their MDT team, if that's physio, speech, psych, art therapist, whoever else is involved, and making sure that they kind of have the most, you know, wrap around
everyone's on the same page about where they're at and
how they can support them in this transition without leaving them, I guess, high and dry at the end of the day.
Yes. I've seen a few families, it's a bit of a shock, like, you know, they come for their last hospital appointment and you know, everyone gets a little bit teary, like, what do we do now? Yeah. Can also be difficult to, when you know that they're approaching that age where they need to, you know, get these skills, and maybe that isn't a priority. So how do you make that a part of their therapy? How do you put that into their goals in a way that's meaningful to them?
Yeah, that's so true.
How do you do it?
I don't know. How do you do it? I guess at the end of the day, it is about what is meaningful to that person. So if that is something that they want to achieve, they want to be able to book their own appointments, they want to be able to learn how to talk to someone on the phone, or how to budget, or how to shop independently. Those are obviously things that we can help support with. But if that is not something that's on the top of this person's priority list, I guess it would be finding solutions to, you know, what is and how we can incorporate those skills elsewhere, or even building on skills they already have. A lot of the time, even past the age of 18, even though they're not in peds services, they still have, you know, families or caregivers or people who do still help them do those activities. So I guess not only kind of teaching the child, but also teaching their families, you know, this is ways to help them become more independent in these things gradually over time, as opposed to just ready. Like right now, because they are an adult age now, which I found, you know, a lot of the time some parents and caregivers do say, you know, they're 16 or they're 18 and why aren't they doing this now, and how can we kind of help them get to that right now? And it's like, well, that's obviously not their top priority at this stage. You know, it's something we can look at in the future. But I guess kind of getting that from A to B, but not all at once.
And being really realistic about what that looks like in their scenario. And I guess from like a therapy standpoint or treatment provider, what conversations are being had between, you know, their pediatric provider and their adult service too? Like how much warm handover, I suppose, is being done between the two of them, and really making sure that that information is going across, so that they don't have to tell their story again
over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And try and remember, like, you know, these are the strategies that we've tried, or, you know, this is the therapy that we've done, or any of that sort of stuff. So I think that's a really important sort of point that can probably make a huge difference when, you know, and probably makes a huge difference for the treatment provider on the other side too. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I know that every service is different, but previously I've known of some services that do some joint sessions with the pediatric provider and the adult service, and then that way they can make the transition a lot more smoother for the person who is having to transition over to those services. So it's not just quite an abrupt end, begin again with someone completely new when they're not a familiar party. And I guess that's just a way of, you know, making that transition a lot smoother and making the child feel more comfortable as they, you know, turn to someone new for that support.
Well, in pediatrics, it's really about, you know, you're growing and you're changing, and we know that there are certain developmental milestones that, you know, are important for you to reach or foundational skills to build on, you know, as you grow and get older, crawling before you can walk, so to speak. And so lots of pediatric services are really sort of developmentally focused and really trying to assist kids to meet those milestones. And when you become an adult, you know, getting into that sort of young adult stage, it's really, instead of developmentally focused, it's really person focused. So it really depends on
what they want to do as opposed to what it says on paper that they should be achieving at that age.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it assumes that you've reached all those milestones, and perhaps if you haven't, that you quite possibly won't. And so it then becomes really broad in, you know, what are my goals then? Like, why am I doing therapy? What is the end point of this? Where in peds it's really quite kind of contained.
Definitely.
Specific functional domains.
And it's like something that their parents identified, or something that a school's identified and said, or preschool being like, you know, they don't play nicely with other kids, or I've noticed that they can't hold their pencil and write correctly, and all those types of things. So you focus on those things that are other people's, you know, observations and opinions, as opposed to when you go into more adult services, it's more based on what that person wants to learn, as opposed to what they're told that they should be doing.
More how to adapt to, you know, perhaps what you can't do, as opposed to building skills to try to do those things.
Definitely. So now it's time for our myth busting section of the podcast. So I'm gonna say a myth or a reality, and you're gonna tell us which one you think it is and why.
Ooh, okay.
So the first one is turning 18 means that you're ready for adult services.
I think we have pretty much covered that is fiction. Sometimes it's true, but
a rare case.
Not everybody.
Yeah.
I have one for you.
Okay.
Adult services offer the same services as pediatrics.
That's a myth. I wish it was true. But sadly not. I feel like at this current stage, you know, we go through different models of function, and also peds is more wraparound supports for everyone as adults currently is not. My next one for you is that independence happens naturally over time.
It seems like it would be the truth. Seems like it.
Yeah.
But often is not the case, particularly in, with the populations that we work with, if independence happened naturally over time, I don't think OTs would have a job. That's what we do. So no, that is fiction. What do you think about the statement, families should step back completely?
That is definitely false. That is a myth. Obviously, they can, step back slightly if it's appropriate, but family is going to be there your whole life. It's not something that just magically disappears once you turn 18.
Still need my mum sometimes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
My last one I have for you is that transition is a single event.
No, definitely not. It is a gradual process and happens over years, should happen over years, and really needs to start well before, that chronological age transition to adulthood. Yeah.
Fully agree.
Yes. To finish off for today, what is the one thing that you hope clinicians will take away from this?
I think that I would like them to know that, this transition feels quite abrupt without the right supports, and that we should kind of be starting this transition a lot sooner than what is currently, the 18. What do you think?
I think that we really need to be a part of the process as opposed to just acknowledging that there is such a gap and, really being the face of the guidance for families and the young people because, they're often trying to navigate it without any sort of clear guidance at all. So.
Well, that brings us to the end. If today's episode resonated with you, whether you're a paediatric OT watching your clients approach that 18-year-old cliff, a community OT picking up the pieces on the other side, or a family going through this right now,
we would love to hear from you. Find us on Instagram at MLEA Occupational Therapy and send us a message or drop a comment. What's your experience of this transition? What's working and what isn't?
We'll be back next month for another episode. Until then, make sure you're following us on Spotify and Instagram so you're the first to know when our next episode drops. And don't forget to check out the show notes for links and information from today's episode.
See you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.